Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how car dealerships are making less money even though they're selling more cars. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money, the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. Let's start off with some recent sales figures to explain why we are in a situation where dealers are selling more cars and making substantially less profit. So first off, this data comes from Cox Automotive. They've actually updated a bit of their data when it comes to January of 2023 because, well, as more information comes in, then they, update the data so that it is as accurate as possible. Now, January compared to December, with the total now looks like it is a month where the market sold about 20% fewer cars than in December. However, if you compare January of 2023 to January of 2022, the market sold about 2.7% more cars. So what that means is that January was a much slower month compared to December, which is pretty typical even in a normal car market. However, this January was better than January of 2022 in terms of overall sales volume. However, sales volume is not the total picture because obviously there's a big part that is missing, and that is sales profit. And that's what we want to talk about in today's video. Finding data on how much car dealerships are making per car deal nationally is actually really difficult because, well, most car dealerships are privately run businesses, so they have no reason to announce how much profit they're making to the public. Yes, there are some dealers that are run by publicly traded companies, but again, getting the information, it's not exactly that readily available. However, there are some large companies that do sell cars that give us at least an idea of what's happening within the car business. And that's, companies like CarMax and Carvana. And right now, they're making roughly about $2,000 per car deal, which I can tell you right now is substantially less than what even those companies were making over the course of the pandemic. I mean, they had per car rates that were in like the $3,000 to $4,000 range. And so they're down by like 50%. And so now we can extrapolate, well, if those companies are down with how much profit they're making on cars, then new car dealers and just car dealers in general are also going to be down with how much profit they make on a per car basis. However, I can tell you anecdotally that dealers are telling me that they're making substantially less money on a per car basis now compared to even just a few months ago, and especially compared to the peak of the pandemic. And so I want to basically put together a little example to illustrate what car dealers are experiencing, and then we'll talk about why this is happening. So our imaginary dealership, let's just say, exists in January of 2022, and let's say that this dealership sells 100 cars in January of 2022. Well, in January of 2022, it was not too unreasonable to assume that those 100 cars were probably sold for over MSRP because pretty much everyone was paying over MSRP back then. So let's say in our imaginary example that this dealership is selling all their cars at $5,000 over MSRP, and just to make math easy, let's say that between the price they pay for those new cars and MSRP is $5,000. So they have $5,000 in markup if they sell at MSRP, but again, they're selling them $5,000 over MSRP. So in each car transaction, they're making $10,000. And again, they sold 100 cars. So you do the math, and that comes out to $1 million in profit for the dealership in January of 2022. Now let's fast forward to January of 2023. So you've got the same dealership, and again, dealers sold about 2.7% more cars. So this dealership went from selling 100 cars to, let's just say, 102 to make math easy. Now, we are obviously in a market where over MSRP asking prices still exist, but transaction prices are not happening over MSRP on average anymore. In fact, they're happening substantially lower. A lot of dealers are now selling cars to customers at, basically just barely over cost, and sometimes they're selling them even at cost, just depending on what the car is. So let's just say hypothetically, just to make math easy for me, that the dealership is selling all of their cars at $1,000 above cost, and they sell 102 cars. Well, you do the math, and the profit that they would make off that is just over $100,000. So the dealership, our pretend dealership, went from making $1 million in a month to making $100,000 in a month. So you can see why dealers are starting to cut heavily on staff, and why, although they are starting to sell more cars now, the situation is getting worse. Now, a 10x decrease in terms of overall profit, that's a little bit on the extreme side, but right now, a lot of dealers are experiencing a profit decrease of close closer to like 25, 50+%. Again, it depends on the dealership, where they're located in the US. It depends on the brand that they represent. There's a lot that goes into it, but every single dealership across the board, no matter what they sell, they are all pretty much down in profit. Now let's discuss why these car dealers are selling their cars for so quote unquote cheap. Although I know a lot of people will comment down below, Ben, car prices are not cheap. And hey, I'm with you. The amount of car inflation we've seen is pretty crazy. And even with some of these discounts, the amount you have to pay for new cars is still pretty high. But anyways, the reason that dealers are getting rid of all of this profit that they were making just over a year ago is because they can't sell cars for the marked up prices. Yes, there are plenty of dealers that are still asking those marked up prices, but I can tell you that they're not getting them because the average consumer literally can't afford it. So again, I am in dealerships every single day. And so, obviously I talk to dealers about car deals and I overhear car deals as I'm going through dealerships. And I want to go over one statistic before I dive into this, and that is the fact that if you're going to buy a new car, you're going to finance it because 85% of people that buy new cars finance them. If you're going to buy a used car, well, you're most likely going to finance it because about 40% of people that buy used cars finance them. So most people that are going in and purchasing a car are financing it, which means that most people are payment buyers. They're not price buyers. Anyone that's outside of this like small little YouTube car buying sphere doesn't know what out the door price means. They don't know any of that kind of stuff. All they know is that they have researched and found that they want a certain car and they know how much money they make per month, right? Well, some people actually don't know how much money they make per month. You'd be shocked. Again, that was something that I dealt with in the car business all the time. And then they know how much money that they think they can spend per month on a car, right? And that's all they think about. They go, I want that shiny one and this is my payment. And seriously, anyone that works at a dealership can attest to this because this is what happens with the average customer when they come in. They go, I want this vehicle and I want to be this much per month. And most people don't have any money down, but maybe they're going to be like, I have, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000 down, whatever it may be. And so this goes right into why dealers are losing so much in profit because the amount of money that people can afford on a monthly basis with cars is just it's not keeping up with how high these car prices have gotten. And so dealers, to basically navigate that situation, they have to discount their cars. I'm seeing this happen time and time again where customers will go in and they won't ask for any sort of discount on the car whatsoever. But the dealership ultimately ends up having to discount the car quite substantially just to get the car in a payment range, a monthly payment range where that customer can afford it. And it makes sense, right? Because we have interest rates that are substantially higher today than they were a year ago, like substantially. I mean, in January of 2022, you could have gotten an interest rate on a brand new car at like 2%. Whereas now the average interest rate in a brand new car is closer to like 7%. And so you can see that, well, cars on average with their MSRPs are more expensive. Money is more expensive on cars. And well, it's not like people are making that much more money today than they were a year ago. And so this is like a perfect storm for dealers having to lower their prices and not making as much money off of car deals, because the only way they're going to put these car deals together is meeting the budgets of these people. And the only way to meet those budgets is to provide big discounts on cars. So in summary, car dealerships are currently selling more cars this time in the year compared to the same time last year, and I'm sure this trend will continue as time goes on because manufacturing is ramping up more and more, and there's just a lot of people on the sidelines have been waiting to buy a car that are starting to jump in. But this comes at the cost of dealership profits, and this is why I've made videos about car dealers laying off people. Again, even though they're selling more cars, they're making substantially less money. And I think that this whole situation is somewhat of a win for the consumer because this is pushing car prices down. Again, they're still pretty dang high, and obviously if you finance a car, you're gonna have to pay a much higher interest rate now than what you would have paid a year ago. But I mean, at least there are discounts available. And I think that this is actually going to kind of level out the playing field for the consumer overall, because car dealers are going to have to do more and more to put car deals together. And again, they are going to go back into a market where it's all about who has the lowest price on a vehicle, right? Who can get the customer the lowest payment. Again, that's what I dealt with as a salesperson all the time. And let me tell you, this didn't happen all the time, but it happened most of the time. The customers that negotiated on a payment, which I'm not saying that you should negotiate on payment, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is the customers that did negotiate on payment got shockingly good deals sometimes because they would be like so set on a particular payment on a car that like we would just have to keep like breaking down the price on the car. And it's not like they were seeing this, they were just seeing the payment come down, but like that's what was happening in reality, because it's like, okay, we're already at 84 months on this auto loan and we're at $550 a month and this customer wants to be at $500 a month. And it's like the only way we're going to get to that $500 a month is if we cut the price on the car. And so, like I said, not all the time, but sometimes these customers got much better deals than someone that was just, negotiating on the out the door price, because they were so set on a payment. And it's like the dealership wanted to sell that car so bad that they're like, okay, you know what? At least this person's financing will lose a little bit of money. Again, that's not a recommendation for how you should put a car deal together, but I'm just saying that I think that this is going to level the playing field, because it's going to bring down prices across the board. And so it's going to change from a market where you go into a dealership and the dealer's like, oh, you want that? 10 grand over MSRP. Whereas now it's going to be like, what's the price on this? And the dealer's going to be like, well, the MSRP is this, but we have this rebate from the manufacturer, and because we want you to buy from us and not the other dealership, we're also going to sell you the car at invoice or invoice minus holdback, whatever it may be. Let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. See ya.